The quality and standards continue to decline, and the focus on academics has really gone out the window, and it's been more about these social issues.
The idea that there are individuals who learn differently, but we shouldn't change anything, then we're not trying to educate every single child. The data shows we need to have that variation. We need to have diversity.
This is a Your Voice, Your Future town hall. Crisis in the classroom.
Picture this. Your child returns home with a heavy heart, having failed their annual reading exam. It's a moment that would leave any parent feeling frustrated, perhaps even outraged. Yet, this scenario is not just a hypothetical for many, it's the harsh reality for a staggering 80% of students in Rochester, New York. Parents there are confronting a relentless storm of educational failures that jeopardize their children's future. So, what are the remedies? What strategies can we employ to navigate out of this storm? Today, we'll delve into the crisis in the classroom in Rochester, New York, looking for solutions to uplift and transform our children's learning experiences. I'm Armstrong Williams. Thanks for joining us. Chronic absenteeism continues to be a problem faced by school districts across the state. Experts say the rising number of kids not showing up to class can have a huge impact in several areas. JT Fletch from WRGB in Albany has more on the consequences and how one school district is working to fix the problem.
Bullying. It continues to be not just a crisis in the classroom, but also a problem for students online. The CDC found roughly 1 in 5 high schoolers reported being actually bullied at school. More than 1 in 6 high schoolers reported being cyberbullied.
Becca, let's go.
The CDC also points out that it's worse for certain groups. Nearly 40% of LGBTQ plus high schoolers were bullied, compared to 22% of heterosexual students. School districts themselves admit it's a problem that occurs once a week, even daily. Tricia Doyle, the North Colony Central School District's Director of Counseling and Mental Health Services, says they try to be proactive.
So the approach we've taken is to provide students with the information that they need to recognize and identify bullying.
High school librarian Becky Jones says one of the things the district tries to do is to get students to empathize with each other.
Sharing perspective, sharing this is the experience we go through, this is the effects that actions have.
And then sometimes we have to be detectives. And if we notice a change in behavior for kids, they're withdrawn or they just don't really seem like themselves, kind of talking with them and saying, is everything okay? You know, is anything going on?
Students who've been in the district for several years say there's been an improvement.
Say we're definitely taking steps in the right direction. Of course, I'm always hoping for more, but I definitely think we're making progress.
But still, the results of bullying could be catastrophic, with the CDC saying it could lead to physical injury, emotional and self-harm, even death. The hope is, as staff offer the tools to students, those students can then step up.
Amanda, stop. She's done nothing to you. Get out of here.
In Albany, I'm JT Fetch.
Joining us now is JT Fetch, reporter at CBS 6 in Albany. JT, do you think the violence we've seen take place in New York State schools has distracted students from learning and teachers from teaching?
Oh, absolutely, Armstrong. It's something that we've seen numerous times in a lot of our local districts where, you know, these kids already face enough. And with so many problems, we've seen that they were there before COVID, but COVID maybe made them a lot more pronounced. And this is certainly the case. One school district that comes to mind, the Hudson City School District, which is in our market about an hour or so south of Albany. They had issues where the days would be totally disrupted. Fights would break out in the hallways. Fights would break out in the cafeterias. And not only would it distract the staff who tried to step in and stop these fights from happening, but it also distracted the students who were not even taking part in this. They all stop, they all take their phones off, out of their pockets and start recording these. And what it leads to is a complete disruption in the school day.
You know, you talked about the shocking numbers that highlight the bullying that continues and how it impacts the classroom, the home, the administrators. What has been the follow-up since your report?
Well, since then, we've tried to find out what districts are doing to sort of counteract this. And we spoke with some folks from one local district, a couple administrators, and a student. And what they really did was they tried to take a proactive approach to this, not a reactive approach. They don't wait for this bullying to happen or these fights to happen, these confrontations to happen. They try to set the stage ahead of time to get the students to understand each other and to understand what everyone's going through, to make sure that these fights don't happen and that everyone kind of has a better understanding of each other and there's a little bit more empathy there. One student we spoke to, they said that there was a lot of progress being made, but they also admitted that they would like to see more. And again, this is something, like you said, that could just lead to disruptions of the school day.
You know, JT, what are these children playing out? Is it something they're missing in the home? They don't have the discipline, a male figure in the home. They set an example of right from wrong. Are they angry? Are they not being fed? Are they not getting attention? Are they latchkey kids? Let's take it back to the home. What are these kids telling us?
Well, in many cases, it's all of the above, but certainly you see things like a lack of nutrition, a lack of certain districts offering not just lunch, but also breakfast. And what can that lead to? That can lead to slow development of young people. You know, they're growing brains, growing bodies, and that could lead to them lashing out. There could be home situations as well that we've heard about. And these are a lot of different components that not just teachers have tried to juggle and deal with, but also counselors. And in many cases, you have school districts where there are just not enough counselors for the amount of students that are in need. And it leads to this snowball effect. And to go back to the pandemic again, you know, remote learning, that whole isolation, that type of thing. Then the kids all get back into the classroom. And then there's a lot more of a chance for them to act out or to be discouraged.
But what are they doing to correct? They put in corrective action for these test scores, which are dismal.
Well, one thing that districts are trying to do here, including a couple of the larger districts in our area that we've spoken with, is they really want to try to catch this thing early and to get parents and guardians involved early, make them aware of this, and also to try to show these students that this is a problem that may not seem like a problem to them now, but it's certainly something that snowballs year after year after year. And you could apply that to the bullying. You could apply that to the test scores, especially with absenteeism, where the absenteeism just gets worse and worse, and it leads to lower and lower test scores. And then ultimately, you have less and less kids graduating. So they're trying to make them realize the scope of the problem early so that they can catch it and try to correct it. But it is an uphill battle for sure, Armstrong.
Well, JT, from CBS 6 in Albany, we always appreciate your in-depth and insightful reporting. Thank you for joining us. Joining us now is Bridget Ziegler, Director of the Leadership Institute School Board Program. We welcome you back. Bridget, you know, coming out the pandemic, more than 80% of New York students in kindergarten through 8th grade were at least one grade behind in math. What do you attribute that to, and why are students so far behind?
Well, there are a number of elements that really are playing a role, and we're seeing this everywhere. But you know, at its core, the quality and standards continue to decline, and the focus on academics has really gone out the window, and it's been more about these social issues. The foundational principles of academic success are really surrounded around parent involvement. We're seeing that being constantly eroded with schools and parents, and also the quality of academics that are being presented. We're seeing more and more that there's focus on feelings and not really foundational principles.
You know what? It's interesting because the New York Teachers Union want to change the graduation requirements and make it more assessment option. What are your thoughts on their recommendation?
So, unfortunately, the teachers' unions, a special interest organization that does not have students at the core. It's the working environment of their teachers and their members. Now, many teachers are very focused on their students. Please do not misunderstand the difference between unions and teachers. Big difference. But they're always constantly trying to erode the accountability measures in place to evaluate how they're doing. And as you mentioned, we're seeing proficiency levels decline at levels that we've never seen before. And it's really criminal. We're failing the next generation of leaders when they're graduating and they cannot read at a third grade level or do basic math. And we're expecting them to be productive members of society upon them graduating. Really, we're seeing more and more young children, young adults basically graduate, which really have no skill set to do so. And honestly, the pipeline is such that they would be dependent on the government. And that is not at all what the education institutions really should be about. They should be about freedom and self-reliance.
Parents statewide, Bridget, are just so concerned over their children recovering from these learning losses from the pandemic. I mean, in your school district, every 8th grader failed last year's state math test. What is it going to take to get these kids back on track? And are the schools doing enough?
Listen, I think we're seeing way too many social trends and focus. I know that recently we were talking about New York recently pushed out new guidelines around, inclusive and safe schools, really about withholding information about gender ideology. We're not focused on the core foundational aspects of making sure children know how to read, making sure they understand the basic phonics, making sure that they understand math, and holding those high standards. We're lowering standards for children when we know that no matter what their socioeconomic background, no matter where they come from, that children, it's human nature to rise to the occasion. And for too long, it's really been more focused about the outcomes and the environment for the adults than it has been for the children and their academic success. And we're continuously seeing a divide, an intentional divide between parents and their children. And all of these play a really pivotal role about the decline in academics. And that is why it's so important for people to get involved. At the Leadership Institute, I'll say these are some of the main reasons people who have never been active before, parents, are getting informed, learning how to run for office so that they can have a seat at the table and fight for their child's future and their peers as well.
Bridget, debate sparked this year when news broke that the New York State School Board of Regents was considering eliminating, Bridget, region exams. Do you think, from your experience, that would be the right move as students work to catch up after the pandemic?
No, I mean, we have to have, so I'll always say I am always in favor of reasonable accountability. I think back in 2014-15 across the country, you saw the pendulum swing where there was so much focus on assessments where really teachers were stressed and they were teaching to the test, and you were losing those foundational aspects again for our children to learn. At the same time, removing them completely, especially off the heels of the pandemic, where we really do need to understand where all of our children are, meet them at their level so that we can see that those learning gains. Taking away those accountability measures will not help those children achieve the outcomes that we want to see them do. Actually, it would really just disguise how bad it is, and that's what I fear is actually happening.
What's fascinating, this seems to be intentional. You can look all across the country, and it's obvious what they're putting in place does not work. And it seems as though it's about one size fit all, no matter what the outcome may be. And we know that kids learn individually and they get excited about education. It takes different things to find what motivates them to learn. How do we get back to what works for the student instead of the bureaucracy?
Oh, that's a great question. And something you said is so true. Every child learns differently. And I think that's why I am personally such an advocate of school choice. And it's exciting to see school choice options grow and expand across the country. We still have a long way to go, but it is important to have customized education because I'm the mother of 3 daughters and they learn all dramatically differently. And so trying to put any child to fit in a box is never going to work. But also our educators, it's a calling. They go into this because they believe in helping inspiring the next generation. And we can hamper sometimes some of these regulatory aspects or some of these new curriculums really take away the fun and the spirit of the teaching. And so that connectivity and the love of learning really starts to go by the wayside. So there's a lot of work to be done. The bureaucracy, the top-down elements don't work. That's why local government matters when it comes to education. That's why it's so important for everyone to be involved at the local level when it comes to your school boards. Whether you have children or not, we're all impacted by the quality of education. And we can't sit on the sidelines anymore. As you started, we are seeing abysmal proficiency rates, and it really is criminal. We're not giving the next generation a real fighting chance to be self-sufficient, and it is time for us to fight for them more than anyone else.
You know, Bridget, you touched on school choice, but in New York, charter school power of enrollment is soaring. Soaring. Why?
Because the district managed schools, the traditional district managed schools, which are often regulated and really run by union bosses, are not there, and they're not serving the interests of the families and the students. And because there is the option of choice, parents have the opportunity to be in the driver's seat and find the academic environment which will allow their child to thrive. And there are studies after studies that indicate school choice plays a huge role in academic outcomes because it puts parents who care the most about their child versus some government bureaucracy in the driver's seat, and to determine what the best environment is for their child to really love the journey of learning, which is a lifelong journey. But we can't be hampering that fire and that excitement so early on, which we are seeing far too often when we're trying to put kids into boxes. And so school choice expansion has been a game changer. There's a lot of states that are providing universal school choice. New York, not yet. But I know that there are a lot of passionate activists in that state that are fighting hard. And you're going to continue to see people leave and vote with their feet on the areas that they know will allow their child to thrive. And they're not willing to let their children sit in failing schools anymore.
Bridget, thank you so much for joining us for Crisis in the Classroom. Up next on Crisis in the Classroom, we look at bullying in our schools. Then we talk with Caitlin Wheeler on transgender policies and state guidance. Stay with us. Welcome back to Crisis in the Classroom. I'm Armstrong Williams. It's no secret that kids can be cruel to each other, sometimes especially when they're in high school. CBS's 6, JT Fetch, has some shocking numbers that highlight how bullying is still a major problem in schools and on social media.
My personal opinion, COVID didn't create the issue that we're facing right now. It just magnified it.
That was how the Gloversville Enlarged School District staff described the situation last year as they were faced with rising chronic absenteeism, which is when a student misses 10% or more of the total number of days enrolled during the school year. In a year, progress, a street team of staff going door to door to students' homes, has led to attendance rising roughly 2% in the middle and high schools. But elsewhere, the problem persists, and it could lead to serious consequences.
It leads usually to depression, the isolation, the stigmatization of it.
Jane Dembski is an expert on this issue. She's the founder of the School Avoidance Alliance. A state education department report found this can obviously lead to low academic achievement, but also things like substance abuse. It also takes teachers away from helping kids who are always there learn when they have to catch up students who skip class.
The school's got to try to engage that student, even though they're outside of school, with texts, phone calls, visits.
It's that engagement that seems to be working in Gloversville. The numbers for some other districts don't seem as easy to fix, though. NYSED data shows nearly 38% of Albany elementary and middle school students are chronically absent. At the high school level, it's nearly 61% of students. In Schenectady, roughly 55% for elementary and middle school students, nearly 60% for high schoolers.
It's gotten even worse since right back to school after COVID. It's just increasingly getting worse.
Even the White House points out chronic absenteeism has nearly doubled from about 15% in the 2018-2019 school year to around 30% in 2021-2022. Dembski says when parents notice the issue, they should involve the school immediately since early intervention is most important. In Albany, I'm JT Fetch.
Joining me now is Caitlin Wheeler, the Raleigh Gaines Center ambassador and former NCAA swimmer. We're talking with her about New York State guidance in supporting transgender students. Caitlin, welcome to the broadcast. In June, New York State issued guidance, allowing transgender students to begin their gender transition at school without parent or guardian knowledge. Do you think schools would be overstepping their boundaries by doing so? And how can allowing students to begin their transition with the support of teachers help them?
Yeah, I think this is completely crazy. I do not support that. You're basically taking parental rights away. Children's brains aren't fully developed until they're in their mid-20s. And so kids don't know what they're doing at that age. It's crazy to think that they're allowing kids to do something as drastic as changing their identity. It's crazy, and that they're preventing parents from parenting their children. They're taking away parental rights. It's absolutely crazy what we're seeing.
And why don't you explain to our audience just how old these kids are?
I mean, these are children. It's absolutely crazy. It's children. And I mean, I've been affected by this personally. I've had to not only compete against men, but I've changed in locker rooms with men. And my little sister, who was 16 years old, was forced to change in a locker room with a biological man, a fully grown adult man. So we're seeing this not only in the school systems, we're seeing this in locker rooms. And it's really a safety issue for these children. We're completely disregarding the safety that it's putting children and women in.
Let's talk about this concept. If you thought as an administrator, someone making a decision that this was all okay, why would you insist on not having the parent involved in their child's, in what you call quote unquote transition, when you realize the person that has to deal with this the most psychologically, physically, mentally is the parent? What is the mindset of not having the parents involved? Help us understand that.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could understand myself. I think taking away the parents saying things is really the ultimate goal, is to remove parents from the picture and take advantage of the children, because as a child, it's easily to be controlled. And so they know that by taking parents out of the picture, they will be able to do whatever they want with the children.
Some would assume when you have this kind of policy in place that the majority of kids are transitioning. Why don't you give us in context just how few of these kids are actually transitioning, where this policy is impacted by the entire body of students and their parents?
Sorry, I think you cut out a little bit there. Would you be able to repeat that?
How many of these kids are actually transitioning when you think about the majority of kids in the school?
I don't know the actual statistics on that, but I know it's not very many. However, I think by putting these ideas into kids' brains, like, kids don't know what they're doing at that age. Gosh, I think back to myself when I was that age. I was figuring out who I was as a person. I was figuring out what I was interested in, what I enjoyed, what I liked. They're in that stage of development, and that's the thing, is these kids making a decision as drastic as changing who they are physically and all of that is, it's way too early to be making crazy and drastic decisions like that. And putting that decision in kids' hands without having parental consultation and all of that is absolutely crazy to me, and it should not be allowed to happen. And it's crazy that our leaders, the people who are supposed to be protecting children and everything, are failing us. They're failing us, and they're breaking our society and telling us that we have to pick up the pieces.
Kayla, here's the deeper issue. These are children. Their brains are not mature enough. They have no experience. They have no idea the consequences of going through something like this. They think it's fun, and to have them isolated from their parents and adults to make this kind of decision. Talk about the consequences for other kids who've gone through this and the devastating results.
Yeah, we're seeing many testimonies of people who have come out and shared their stories, horror stories really, of their experiences of transitioning at a very young age, going through all of the gender reassignment surgeries, the sex reassignment surgeries, and how much they've regretted it. Not only is this a very grueling, horrible, physically and mentally painful process, but it's drastic. It changes the course of your entire life. And we see how many people actually regret it in the long run.
And Kayla, it doesn't stop with one surgery. It continues and continues.
No, and we see there's data and studies that show that these sex reassignment surgeries, they don't end up helping the people, the individuals that go through them, that actually ends up hurting them even more.
Can the parents overturn this?
Can the parents what?
Oh, change this policy.
I think there should, and if our leaders aren't, we need to get better leaders who will.
Well, listen, I can tell this is a very emotional and painful issue for you, particularly being an athlete and seeing what these little kids are going through. Thank you so much for your time and your perspective and joining us on Your Voice, Your Future. Thank you very much. Joining us on our panel is Jamaica Miles, parent and school board member for the Schenectady City School District, and Carmen Leonardo, parent in the Penfield Central School District and member of the Pinefield United for Education Excellence. We welcome you both to our show. Jamaica, how is it possible to talk about little kids whose brains are just developing and parents has no say-so or no knowledge about this issue of transitioning?
I think that we first have to talk about some of the language we're using right now. If we're talking about transgender children or children who identify as transgendered or are asking to be called by a pronoun different than what they were given at birth, what age group are you talking about? Instead of us insinuating that we're speaking about small children, which unfortunately happens far too often, let's be real. We're talking about children who are in middle school and high school that have identified what their pronouns are, and for us to simply respect their wishes.
Leonardo, your thoughts?
Well, you know, I think it's important to respect everyone's wishes, but we are talking about minor children, and I think that parents need to be involved in the process, you know, beginning someplace. And I think that what we see with the state guidelines, which is alarming to many parents, is that you know, parents are kind of looped out of that process. You know, if a child, regardless of their age, that is a minor child, approaches an educator with the intent of announcing or seeking assistance that they're going to transition or they wish to transition, but they don't want mom and dad to know, or their legal guardian to know, that's somewhat of a problem for parents.
Jamaica, I mean, these kids are under 18. They're still under the care of their parents.
That's right.
How would you not want the parents involved in the process, particularly if they're not prepared for what this transition means? This burden is going to be left to the parents. How can you even advocate anyone not having the parents at least in some of this equation?
Well, if you look
I'm asking Jamaica.
No one is saying that children shouldn't, no one is saying that parents are not involved in their children's lives. Again, let's be careful about language.
We're talking about in the issue of transitioning.
Yeah, no, listen.
Should parents have any say-so in their child's transition?
We're talking about if a child identifies as a gender different than the one that they were given at birth. Transitioning is something that is used as a medical term very often. If an individual is changing their physical appearance in specific ways, a child identifying as he, him, as opposed to she, her, depending on what they were given at birth, no one is saying that a parent should not be involved in their child's lives. What we do often say
Let's talk about
is that children,
should they be involved in that decision?
Children come to school, and it's supposed to be a safe space for them. So why would we not want our children to find an adult that they feel comfortable talking to? We have guidance counselors and psychologists inside our schools. We should welcome that there are children looking for an opportunity to talk to someone for any reason, for any reason that involves their lives, to walk up to them and say, hey, I would like to talk to you about this. This is something impacting me and I want to be able to have this conversation. Again, it's not to remove parents from a decision-making role or from being a part of their children's lives, but to offer space for that conversation to happen.
Thanks, Jamaica and Leonardo. We will continue this conversation in the next block. When we return, we discuss the stress and influx of migrants into our school systems. Stay with Crisis in the Classroom. I'm Armstrong Williams. Welcome back to Crisis in the Classroom. I'm Armstrong Williams. The number of migrant students registered in Rochester City schools has grown since the start of the school year. 13 Wham's Karen Erwitz has the latest from the district.
Rochester City School District Deputy Superintendent Ruth Turner knows what it's like for migrant students.
I was a refugee to this country, so I know personally what that's like, acclimating yourself. But absolutely, you're in a new environment, you're in a new country, you're in a new area, so that transition is a long and slow one.
Dozens of asylum-seeking families arrived from downstate to stay at the Holiday Inn in downtown Rochester on New York City's dime. Turner says the district was ready to meet their needs.
For years, we've had many, what do we have? Maybe over 100 spoken languages in our district. So the diversity is one of the things that we celebrate. So we've not had any barriers in getting translators or having folks learn about services in their home language.
The influx of migrants to New York State prompted a letter from the state education department outlining that by law, schools are required to provide immigrant school-age students with an education. Migrant students are also required to submit vaccination records within 14 days like any other student. The RCSD started the school year with 52 students registered, and that number has grown.
So far, we've been able to register 87 students to date in our schools, all the way from elementary school to high school. They're getting a lot of support, not only from our district support staff, but also from the community and community agencies.
As the district contends with declining enrollment and a massive school reconfiguration plan, Turner says they do not anticipate having to turn any student away.
We're a firm believer that all students deserve a quality education. So if it gets to that point, we'll just keep expanding to meet the needs of all our students. But we're not concerned about that right now. Again, we welcome all families, all our students to the Rochester School District, and we're doing our very best to try to meet every student's individual needs.
Karen Edwards, 13 Wham News.
Join us again, our panel, Jamaica Miles, parent and school board member for the Schenectady City School District, and Carmen Leonardo, parent in the Penfield Central School District, a member of the Penfield United for Education Excellence. Jamaica, does Rochester have the infrastructure and resources in place to accommodate this influx of migrants?
I think that when we're looking at any school district receiving an influx of any children from anywhere, we know that New York State has to step up as a whole and ensure that they have the programs and resources necessary for every individual child's needs, whether they are English language learners or simply migrating from a different part of the state or a different community. So there being an influx, Rochester, again, is a place that has a diverse community, so they are better equipped than some other places, but it's the requirement. Every child in New York State is required to have a quality education.
But I understand that. I understand what the expectations are, but what is the reality of it all? What are the challenges that comes with it in terms of the burden, and even for the migrants themselves who are adjusting and learning a whole new world?
I think it's important for us to remember that when a community is receiving new individuals, the community needs to step up. The school district being adamant to support its students and families is wonderful. What are those other community organizations doing to have a holistic approach to ensure that families are able to come to this community, have the support that they need, know the programs and resources that are available, and how they can become a part of this new community, as well as the community welcoming them. So it's that partnership, it's the community school model that we've been talking about for a very long time in Schenectady as well as across New York State. Those things will make a huge difference.
Leonardo, how is this really playing out? Is it really working? What are the upsides, but also what is hidden that no one talks about?
Well, you know, we can have differing opinions on how the migrants got here, but you know, the reality is that they're here. I don't know that we have any in the town of Penfield attending Penfield schools. We might. But to the extent that, you know, any community or any school district does have a migrant youth population, I think we need to do the humanitarian thing in every respect, including education, and welcome them and teach them. There are, of course, many obstacles. I'm sure that there are many cultural differences, many language differences and barriers, and relying not only on school resources but on other community resources to help with that process, I think, is necessary.
What about the language surrounding these asylum seekers, Jamaica?
I guess I'm asking for you to clarify.
No,
what
no,
do you mean, what
you
about
know,
the language?
people describe them differently in terms of people coming here as asylum seekers. Obviously, there have been a lot of pushback because the school systems here in Rochester feel they're already impacted. Their kids are having troubles learning, and then you put this extra burden on the school system with the language barrier and everything else. It just makes it tougher for the school system and all those strategic partners that are involved.
Again, us having the ability as any school district, in the city of Schenectady, more than 30 languages are spoken already inside our school district. It's us being committed to making sure that every child has a quality education. If there's a language barrier, then create a language solution. If there is derogatory language being spoken about a particular group who enters a community, that's a bias and racism problem that we've seen for, I don't know, the last couple hundred years since the inception of this country. We face that every single day. That doesn't mean that these children and families are any less deserving than everyone else in the community.
But let me ask you, how are they adjusting? What is your report card in terms of the progress?
So we have in Schenectady County a number of individuals that were brought to specifically Rotterdam. And I can remember as a child when there were a number of individuals that came into the community and changed our demographics. It's a growing process, but it's one that's completely possible. I've seen the most amazing outpour of love and support and commitment from community members that had never experienced that type of diversity before. Yet they stepped up and looked for an opportunity to welcome individuals, to learn about their culture, as well as share information about their own communities. So here we are. It's a wonderful example about what it looks like for all of us to be able to live together and everyone have access and opportunity.
So Leonardo, how much can the Rochester schools absorb? And what is the impact on its own culture and its own identity?
Well, you know, I think we have to be prepared to absorb whatever population comes our way. And we have to be prepared not to turn anyone away from any community, regardless of, you know, how they got here. The fact is, again, they got here, and we need to do the humanitarian thing and support them in every possible way that they can. But we also should not lose sight of the fact that migrants and immigrants and asylum seekers and a whole host of different people have been coming to this country for years, hundreds of years and arguably longer. And, you know, they became part of a culture that they assimilated into. They learned the language, and they learned about our society, and learned how to operate. And I think that you know, is an expectation that we ought to have for people coming to this country. And I would hope that.
And I disagree.
Well, I would hope that you know, folks coming would assimilate and learn how to become productive members of society.
Jamaica, even your Governor Hochul has asked for federal aid because she feels that the migrant influx is just really flooding and impacting not only the school system but communities. I mean, you have even Mayor Adams in New York is pushing back on the impact. Obviously, there's only so much that any school district can absorb without it having some kind of impact in terms of the quality of the education which you want to achieve.
State and federal government absolutely have a responsibility to ensure that every child has a quality education. But I'm definitely going to go back to the fact that we're making statements of individuals need to assimilate to this culture, that they need to assimilate to this language, that they need to learn what it means to be in a society different than their own, as if their own society has no value. That is seriously concerning. These are individuals that have their own cultures and ideas that should be valued, which is why I'm very proud of the Schenectady City School District as we highlight and lift up the diversity that we currently have to ensure that individuals feel welcome for who they are, not the need to become someone else.
Thank you, Jamaica and Carmen. We'll check back with you both in just a little bit. More of Crisis in the Classroom when we return. What books are your kids reading? And an action item for all parents up next. We're back with Jamaica Miles and Carmen Leonardo and Crisis in the Classroom. So Jamaica, are they also, the migrants, required to get the vaccination? Are COVID protocols still in place?
So the protocols that are in place for all children apply to all children unless there is a religious exemption. I know that for Schenectady County, they worked very closely with the county health department to ensure that the children receive the vaccinations that they need if they didn't already have them. Again, that partnership to ensure that children have what's necessary to enter the schools is really important.
What does diversity look like for you, and why is it important, Jamaica?
I think often folks say diversity as this catch-all phrase, but in the reality that we live in, it often relates to racial and ethnic groups, as well as gender and sexual orientation specifically. And what it looks like is representation for individuals to feel as their whole selves, to be able to show up every single day as their full selves and not feel as an other, or as if they somehow are different and not worthy or less than. And so diversity means, in our reality, that there is that representation regardless of the spaces that we sit in.
So, Leonardo, how does the diversity that Jamaica just described help these kids to become more proficient in math and English and reading and change the dismal trajectory of their academic standing?
Well, it sounds like what you're asking me is how does an individual's certain set of characteristics that either define them as part of a group or separate them from other groups impact their ability to learn. And frankly, I don't think that impacts their ability to learn at all. We shouldn't be approaching education differently for different people. To me, that seems rather absurd. All children need to learn. Everybody learns differently and at a different pace. And everybody has things that appeal to them in the learning process, subject matter. And frankly, I don't think that has anything to do with one's personal immutable characteristics.
Jamaica, how should the textbooks reflect that diversity, or what should the textbooks reflect?
Well, let's start with data. too often folks come from a space of this is my opinion and therefore that's all I need to accept. But the data and the science, the results from individuals doing research for decades now shows that when there is a reflection of different individuals, it allows children to be able to learn. The cultural competency that is necessary for teachers to have in order for every child in the classroom to learn is necessary. We see this often with testing. If there's a test that says, Jeffrey's on the farm at 5 a.m. and then he works for 6 hours. What time did he stop mowing the lawn? And it's geared towards inner city kids that have no point of reference. It impacts their ability to learn. There's data that supports that information. So the idea that there are individuals who learn differently, but we shouldn't change anything, then we're not trying to educate every single child. The data shows we need to have that variation. We need to have diversity. We need to have books and literature that shows a variety of individuals to ensure that children see a full representation, not just of themselves inside a book or a classroom, but to be reflective of the global world that they are going out into. So this is true not just of schools that have a diverse body of students, but also of schools that have a majority white students, because those children are going to go out into a world that doesn't necessarily look like the classroom that they're sitting in. It does them a disservice to not ensure that there is diversity in their curriculum as well.
Carmen, you're part of a parent group which has previously raised concerns over the curriculum in public schools. What topics do you fear are not setting students up for academic success?
I don't know that it's a question of what topics are not setting students up for academic success. I think that it's a question of what topics are introduced at what age level and what is age appropriate.
You know, Jamaica, there has been a shift to include more elements of diversity, equity, and inclusion in New York schools, which some parents feel is inappropriate for the school setting. Your thoughts?
Why is it inappropriate to show your child that people exist?
Are you saying that's what they're pushing back against?
I'm saying that if there are parents who have concerns about diversity in the way that we've described it right now, what is their concern? I did hear my fellow panelists talk about it being age appropriate. We're not seeing specifically in New York that there is anything age inappropriate about things that are being presented to children. These are educators who have gone through a rigorous course of degrees to be able to teach our children and who are continual learners to ensure they're doing their best jobs, as well as the fact that we've seen in other states the idea of something not being age appropriate has been pushed back by organizations such as the ACLU because it's discriminatory. Now, I understand that not all of us are going to agree about what is or isn't a thing, but we should be able to accept that there are individuals who have a wealth of knowledge on a topic and be able to respect their expertise and not simply be individuals to discredit them.
Well, listen, thank you both for joining us. Many of the issues discussed today are in the book Crisis in the Classroom, written by Dr. Ben Carson, Benjamin Crump, where we take these issues head on. I encourage you to go out and get your copy of the book today. You know, without education, we really have nothing. It shapes the future by empowering individuals with knowledge, skills, and values. However, when education system fails, the consequences are just dire. The neglect of our youth hampers their future potential and undermines our nation's ability to thrive. As a result, entire generations may suffer from limited opportunities, unable to contribute meaningfully to their communities or compete in a global economy. This is precisely why we must invest and commit to educational excellence for all to ensure a bright future for our children and our nation. Thank you for joining us for this special Crisis in the Classroom. I'm Armstrong Williams.